We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jen Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. So many go-to-market strategies start with a company-centric focus on channels and distribution. But what if we focused our go-to-market strategy around the people we're trying to reach? To discuss the concept of people-first go-to-market strategy, I'm joined by Mark Kilens, founder of Club PF and CEO of TAC. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm excited for this conversation. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. So glad to have you on to talk about this topic. I'm a big proponent for a customer-centric strategy, and I think your take on it is really unique. So I'm excited to bring it to our audience today.
Yeah, I can't wait. There's a lot of things that have been going on in the last few years. Been a lot of things kind of brewing in the background for a long time that have kind of reached a boiling point, if you will. So we should definitely talk about those and help people figure out how to find the right course, find a new tack, if you will, for their businesses. Because it's hard. It's harder than probably almost any time out there right now.
It is. So we're going to get into that. And maybe that's actually a pretty good place to start. Like, maybe tell us a little bit about kind of your experience in your career as a marketer and the journey that prompted you to create Club PF and TAC.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. So I was fortunate enough to be introduced to HubSpot at my first kind of company that I worked at out of college way back in 2008, 2009 during the Great Recession. We were a very early HubSpot customer. We were able to use HubSpot and inbound marketing to kind of grow and save that business. I was able to join the company HubSpot in 2010. Do that for about 8.5 years, just life-changing experience. We've now also built TAC on HubSpot. So full circle, definitely for me. I guess you could say my claim to fame at HubSpot is helping build HubSpot Academy. And through that whole experience, right, and the philosophy and belief system that Dharmesh and Brian built at HubSpot, I became obsessed with focusing on the customer, focusing on people, and how do you serve them? Like, one of my mottos is serve people first. And it's definitely a lot of the inspiration behind TAC. And what I've noticed then after leaving HubSpot at Drift and at Arameet is this need for a new way to think about how do you go to market? Because more and more people now have been talking about how you go to market is not just through marketing or sales, but it's marketing, sales, product, finance. And the customer success team. And then it's how do you actually do this, to your point, how you kicked it off, in a way that is more sustainable, that's more putting the people at the center of kind of each experience, each interaction you're trying to create. And then these undeniable truths that we can talk about, Jen, that are happening to all of us and to all of us at businesses right now that are putting an immense amount of pressure on the business or on a business where it's needing or leading us to have to change, have to figure out a new way to do things. So yeah, happy to unpack anything, everything. Like I told you in the beginning, I'm an open book, so we can literally talk about anything, Jen. So yeah, let's dive in.
Amazing. Everybody is going to start to think I'm gotten a job at HubSpot because everybody on the show here is now HubSpot people. Our next episode is going to be with Scott Brinker, and we're a HubSpot partner. So huge fans of HubSpot, but we're not going to talk too much about them today.
Scott is going to be a much better guest than I will be. Scott is an incredible person. He and I was able to work at HubSpot for a little bit. He is just a legend.
He is a legend, but you are too in your own right. So we're going to talk about this people first go-to-market strategy. And maybe just for those that aren't familiar, maybe with the concept, how do you define it? What is a people first go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, so let's talk about first, before we define it, let's just talk about why do you need to kind of shift in this direction? Let's talk about some of these undeniable truths. So there's 6 of them, Jen. So I'll do a quick overview of all 6. We can break down any of them in more detail And we can also talk about like the old way, the way that kind of a lot of companies use today, which is this kind of company first mindset. But let's talk about the big things that are impacting companies from a macro standpoint. So number one is an explosion of content. For me at HubSpot, or being a HubSpot customer, I could rank number one. Do you remember these times? You could rank number one for a pretty like moderately difficult keyword in like 3 days back in 2008, 2009. Like, does anyone remember that?
Yeah.
So easy, like so nice, so easy. Content explosion though is here. It's the amount of data that's being produced on globally, not just on the internet, but globally, is exponentially hockey sticking up. So there's that. There's a channel saturation going on. Channels are more saturated, more expensive. There's less new channels. That's number two. Number three, privacy legislations, concerns, the removal of cookies, putting immense amount of pressure on businesses, especially marketing teams. You got, of course, the pandemic, which is still affecting businesses, redistribution of work, how people think about work, how they buy things, their time. A lot of habits were changed. Some came back, some didn't. Some were just brand new. You have this explosion and conversions of AI. The fifth one, and then the last one, which will abate at some point, but it's going to be years in terms of the effects, is interest rates, which is almost an effect of COVID. So you can say, is it a real thing in terms of a direct like mega trend? Of course it is, but it's really because of COVID, which created all the stimulus, and it was too much probably, and supply chain issues and all these other things, right? And demand for things that we've never kind of seen in the history of the last 100 years. So it's changed a lot of things. So 6 macro things, Jen, that are just necessitating businesses having to change how they think about go-to-market. So I'll pause there because some of those are at different stages and phases of evolution and maturity. Right, because the content, has been going on since digital content. That is, I'm talking about digital content, right? Has been increasing year over year for a long time, right? But AI, it's been in the background, it's been lingering around, but now it's just been just like bam, right? And like just this massive explosion of expectations and chatter. So all of these are in different kind of stages, and they're affecting businesses differently. But there's an undeniable truth where companies can't think about going to market alone anymore. They can't just spam with their brand, their audiences anymore, because people are getting smarter and smarter, and there's just so much ways to be smarter about how to interact with the company these days. There's more tools for the buyers and customers. And when it comes to that, it's all about no more quantity of what you do. It's the quality of the things you do, and there's a lot of issues around like businesses still feeling like, hey, I'm trying to get you to buy something. It's all about just the money. It's about the transaction versus, it doesn't matter if you're a SaaS business or not a SaaS business. It's all about how do you create long-term relationships with these people. So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of things that businesses can do differently today. And I saw some of those at HubSpot, at Drift, at Airmeet, and now at TAC. We're trying to help companies change in this new direction, this more people-first approach.
For sure. And I feel like too, like what you're describing, these like 6 undeniable truths, in my mind, I'm like doing the math of like exponentially the overlap and the like, well, if you multiply the AI times the increased content and, oh, by the way, like as you were talking about, like, oh, it used to be so easy to rank for a term, right? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you could just do it. You decide you want to rank it and you just do. And now it's like, we don't even know what going to happen with search algorithms because there's natural language search terms. Like there's just so many changes happening that I feel like it's that 6 all times each other. Like what's 6 to the power of whatever? You know what I mean? Yeah. But it's almost too much to keep up with. It's like the thing that you just finally fixed because you realized it changed a year ago. Now all of a sudden you're having to adapt to another thing, and there's new technology. There's always more content. We saw, that was a huge, I think, sort of catalyst from the pandemic as well, because there was really no more in-person marketing happening. Nobody was going to events. People were not taking clients out for dinner anymore. So everything moved online, even though it was already there. And it just, all of those, like, how do you grapple with those 6 undeniable truths sort of compounding on top of each other?
Well, so you got to go back to the basics. So here's an interesting way to think about this, Jen. So I mentioned that data explosion, right? Which is driven through like digital content and a ton of other types of data that's being created in the world. So if I look at the actual stats, and this is in zettabytes, not gigabytes or terabytes. This is zettabytes. I don't know how many zeros that is. It's a lot of zeros. In 2023, it's going to be like 125 million or so zettabytes of data generated globally. And then in 2025, the prediction is it's going to be like 175. It's like going up a magnitude every single year. But then you look at the human population growth. Yeah, it's gone up from like 2 billion to almost 8 billion in the last like 70 years. But if you look at the projection of human population growth over the next, say, 70 years, it's actually only going to grow to like probably 10 billion, and maybe we'll even start shrinking. So when you think about like just that kind of mental thought, you're going to have more AI algorithms, more content, theoretically more channels that can be more saturated, more just things coming at you, and more like interruptive type stuff. Like now what like inbound is, or what we're calling people first go to market, is go to the thing that has always been in place, that's going to be more important than probably ever before, which is your network, which is your people, and think about ways you can partner with them. So we have a set of principles when it comes to people first go to market. It actually creates the acronym people. And the first principle in that acronym, that is people, is partner. Like, actually think about how do you create meaningful relationships with other people and organizations, so you're collaborative and supportive. I'm happy to go through all of them if you want, but like that's one of the first ways you move into this mindset, is you think about, do I believe that I need a different approach? Is it better for the enterprise value of my business? And are the things I'm doing today, are they working? And if they are working, how well do you think they will still be working down the road? Because you have to consider like today, but also the future state. So there's a lot to unpack here. And we built a whole model around this idea that we can unpack. But again, like Jen, you lead us in the discussion. Like I'm happy to go in any direction you want to take it.
Amazing. I want to hear the full acronym of the people. And I don't know where it fits in the conversation, but maybe first, before we get into those specifics, I want to, like, this is the catalyst, right? Those 6 macro kind of undeniable truths as you describe them. This is the catalyst. We can't do marketing and go to market and business the way we used to. That's where we are now. So how does a people first strategy help to combat that challenge that we're all facing?
Well, at the end of the day, the most important thing to do, right, Jen, is build trust. Like, would you agree? Like, trust building is like foundational to a brand and to marketing, to sales, to customer success. I don't know. I mean, is there anything more foundational than trust building, do you think?
No, because I do think that people buy from people that they, trust, respect, are learning something from, and somebody who's going to help make their job and their lives better in some way.
Exactly. And so like what's also happened now, right? So the other thing is people really value convenience. That's a fact, right? It's actually becoming sometimes less convenient to go to a brand these days than to go just to a person. Because a brand has created a company first approach to buying from that brand, at least on the B2B side. The B2C is definitely more innovative here, but like B2B, it's like, you got to go through this process. You got to do this thing. We haven't innovated our websites. All of our websites basically look the same for the last 20 years. I can't believe the website has not been disrupted yet. It's coming. It will be disrupted. But, and there's some interesting things that I've seen out there that we could talk about, but there's so many fundamentally status quo things, broken status quo things when it comes to kind of the B2B side of go to market that need to be disrupted. And it's like, all right, well, you got to build trust. And now with AI, like, do you trust the AI? Like, who knows who is who? Like, what is what, right? But if you go to the people, and this is what more and more folks are doing, at least from the data that I look at and the stuff that I'm studying, they're going to the networks and the groups of people and the individuals that they have built a relationship with and have that trust established with. So now we need to teach businesses how to do that at scale using this people first go to market model. So it's all about this idea of rethinking the trust building process. And I do think, AI will level off, and who knows how it's going to unfold. But, AI is probably doing some stuff to not help with trust building. And it's also, it might be hurting the convenience thing as well, because you start to question, things, right? Like, I definitely am. Like, what about you?
Yeah, well, sometimes, I think what it's really interesting watching the conversations about like AI watermarking, and like I know people who write on their own content like this piece was written 100% by a human or 20% by AI. Like I think there's so much value in leveraging AI in a smart way. But that transparency of like this is how much AI has contributed to our this particular piece of content, it's just a super interesting conversation, and kind of like I don't know exactly where I stand on it, but it's totally worth paying attention to right now, because we're in a totally different world. I mean, this type of AI, like generative AI technology, has been around forever, not forever, but for a while. But it's only been in the last 6 months or 9 months where it's been in everybody's hands. And so now there's just like we're in a new level of conversation about it. And I think having that conversation openly is what helps to build trust.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Jen. Like AI is going to do a lot of good things for people first go to market. Like AI, every company will have an AI customer facing persona, bot, if you will, right? Both from a voice standpoint and a text standpoint. I'm convinced of that. I don't know if it's going to be in 3 years, 10 years, but there's going to have to be people that train that maintain that make sure the voice and tone of that AI is on brand, is in the voice of the people, right? Of the brand. So it's just going to be a redistribution of skill sets and other things. But AI is going to do a lot to help, bring people first go to market to life. Right now, though, it's still distracting us from getting closer to our customers and buyers. Because what's happened is software. Like we've decided as like a lot of B2B businesses have decided to say, like, look, we're going to partner with a lot of software over the last 5, 10, 15 years. And what happens is you build up these tech stacks. And what does it do? It distracts you from what's most important, the people. So you're like, wait a minute, I gotta buy this, I gotta implement it, I gotta manage it, I gotta maintain it, I gotta think about it. It's just like, oh my God, like now you're forgetting, wait a minute, I gotta serve the customer. That's number one. What am I doing even here, right? So AI now is distracting us from some of this other stuff, which is ironic. I think again, it will even out. It's gonna even out. But yeah, for me, there has to be an elevated way of thinking about channels these days. Sure, you'll have channels like email, you'll have channels like paid search, social, other channels come about, but those aren't strategic channels. Those aren't like things that you use to really craft an overarching go-to-market strategy. Those are channels in terms of how you communicate with people, but they're not like a go-to-market strategy, right? Because if you try to talk to your sales leader and CS and product finance leader about, hey, and even to your board about like, hey, like let's really talk about our email channel. Like, what are you talking about? Like, no, like it's a tactic. It's very tactical. So we've built these channels in the model that are community-led, member-led, customer-led, and a lot of other businesses are talking about those three as well as ways to think about how to bring this approach and mindset to your business, where all of the teams at the business, including product and finance, can be partnering to actually activate that channel so that it drives more revenue and more customer lifetime value. So it's some of this is mindset, some of this is actual skills, some of it is tools and technology. But it's ultimately, I think it's going to be like a transformation for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that actually that focus on technology and maybe a little bit of shiny object syndrome isn't new, right? There's always been this sort of, I remember when ABM was like a new idea and it was sort of a buzzword. It was like, oh, what targeted ad serving platform are you using? It's like, well, ABM isn't a technology, right? It should be like a mindset of like how you think about your go-to-market focused on accounts as opposed to a one-to-many strategy. But it was so like, it became synonymous with the technology you used for it. And I think this is just the evolution of that. And we've always had this need to like focus on the customer. And, I think some companies do it really well and others struggle with it. But I've had a lot of experience. Somebody sent me like, oh, here's our new explainer video. I'd love to hear what you think about it. And I'm like, that video, nobody cares about your company story. And I hate to say that because the people internally at your business, you care, I care about my company story, but your customers care about their problems and they want to know how you're going to help them solve them. And so that's the importance of sort of flipping it around and not being so focused on telling everybody what we do, but actually, how we help. Maybe that's the difference.
Well, and this is where I would suggest everyone invert their thinking about AI. You don't think about AI from how businesses will use AI. Think about how customers and buyers, you and me, will use AI to block businesses.
Yeah. That's interesting.
No one, that's what I'm thinking about, right? Like, and I learned this from David Cancel, and he learned it from someone else. But like the inversion theory is a very important thing to do, especially when you have these like hype cycles. Metaverse was a hype cycle, crypto is a hype cycle. AI will be gone, and it'll be in this trough of disillusionment, right? Whatever, soon enough, and then it'll be a slow and steady increase in productivity. But like, there'll be something else after AI. It could be spatial computing that Apple announced the other month. Like, I don't know, but like, it is definitely in this mega hype cycle, and I think a lot of folks might be thinking about it in the wrong way. Because like once we as customers get AI, like it's gonna be a battle of the AI just battling each other, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. I want to just acknowledge that like everybody who's commenting in on the chat, like thank you so much for participating in the conversation. I wish I could like call all of you out live, but there's a lot of activity in the live right now. So thanks everybody for listening in and participating in the chat. You mentioned, so maybe now's a good time actually. I want to go back to the PEOPLE acronym, and I also want to hear a little bit more about, you mentioned community, member, and customer, and those kind of three buckets. So I want to dive into that a little bit. Like, how do you think about those three areas when it comes to people first strategy? And going back to, what does that PEOPLE acronym stand for?
Yeah, we'll start with the PEOPLE acronym because I'm a huge believer in principles. Principles like are so important because they guide thinking, behavior, decision making, all of these different things. So if your business doesn't have a set of principles, it follows, and values are different than principles. We can unpack that if you want, but just do a quick Google search, principles versus values. You'll quickly learn like what's the difference. Principles can be like really like what is the right word? Bendable. You can make them your own almost to some degree, right? Like and values are more hard and fast. So the 6 principles we put behind people first go to market are partner, empathy, originality, presence, learning, experience. And each one is quickly defined. So like partner is about being collaborative and supportive. Empathy is about being kind and thoughtful. Originality is about be your authentic self. Presence is be in the moment. Learning is be the student and the teacher. And then experience is just be memorable. And a lot of them play off each other, right? And some of them are like more understood probably by a lot of people and less understood. I think presence is one of my favorite ones. Like, be in the moment. Presence is like, that's really hard these days for people and brands. And we can unpack that one, but they spell people. And it's just like, hey, like, you got to first kind of believe in the undeniable truths. Do you believe there's a better way? And then do you believe in this kind of way of thinking when it comes to these principles, and how these principles will help guide the stuff that I mentioned at the beginning, right? The decision making, the ways in which you communicate, etc. So happy to dive into any of them, but those are the ones that we've created, and we created those as part of, I say we because it was a collective effort with the early members of Club PF, which is this club and community for people that kind of believe in the people first approach. And we worked with them and just put them on LinkedIn, and we built them in public, which is what you should do these days, in my opinion. And a lot of other people helped craft those.
That's interesting. That last comment you made is, do you think that that helps to build trust and sort of relationship with your community if you're kind of co-creating this stuff with them?
Oh, 100%. You have to. If you're going to build any types of vision, mission statements, principles, values, you do it with the group of people, the other folks on your team. If the leader just tries to do it top down, it will either not work or not work that well. It'd be a lot less effective. You have to make it a team thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that for sure. I have this conversation a lot with, clients or just people out in the industry when it comes more specifically to like positioning and storytelling. It's like when your company positioning is written by your marketing leader and then distributed out to the company, like, here's our positioning now, let's use this. People go, thanks for sharing, right? But if you actually create it cross-functionally with the product, the finance, the sales, the customer success team members, then everybody's invested in it and everyone sort of like believes in it from the inside out versus just a mandate that comes from a single department or a single person. So that cross-functional collaboration, and I think what you're describing too in this sort of community aspect is not just people internally, but also your community, involving them. They're more invested in what you're doing and building a relationship while building a funnel, I guess. I don't want to call it a funnel because what you're describing to me doesn't feel like a funnel, right? That feels like the company-centric approach, but it's sort of a bit of both.
Well, a funnel is just a way to measure something, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's, you could say it's other things. Of course, it's like an actual physical thing that you pour liquid solids through, right? The principles, I hope people just steal them and take them and use them as the principles that they want to, evangelize and organize, their company or team around, or use them and adapt them in some way. But they're built for people. They're like, take them, use them. I appreciate the comments. Someone loves them. It sounds like that's awesome. But it's for me, and I learned this from HubSpot and just reading a lot of people who've done just amazing things in life and business. You gotta go to that why, that belief system, right? And that's where a lot of companies struggle to spend enough time thinking about that, working on that, evangelizing that. It's I was telling Nick, who's again the co-founder of TAC with me, like, we're gonna have to have this conversation that I'm having with you right now, Jen, thousands of times. I think Brian Helligan said like recently he's talked about inbound marketing in like 15,000 times, publicly, which I don't actually, probably might be more than that even. Who knows, right? I just do the number of days HubSpot's been around, right? Divide that by 15,000. It could be even more than that, right? 365. Yeah, he probably does it multiple times a day sometimes. So yeah. Anyway, I digress. What I'm saying is, you have to, for something to really stick and just have that durability, you got to get people to come along with you, but that you also have to be, the chief evangelist, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And that's hard for people to do because they start to feel like, I know I do. I start to feel like I'm being repetitive, but then I remember that I might say something 1,000 times, but most people only heard it once or twice from me, right? So it's not repetitive for them because there's so much, like you said before, there's an explosion of content. It's all saturated. We're in this culture where we're just scrolling, right? Like, you've got to capture somebody's attention in like 2 seconds. So if I'm talking about whatever it might be, a connected marketing strategy with revenue growth, I've got to do that 15,000 times in order for somebody to hear it once. And I think some, CEOs and leaders, they struggle to with that feeling of being repetitive, but it is so important that you just keep getting the message out there, and that's how people remember it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's also like the principle of consistency. There's a few different things there, but like, it's also a lot of people change. It's like change tack, change direction, maybe too soon with something, right? And all they need to do is maybe like, adjust the course by a few degrees versus trying to turn the thing in a whole different direction. And I'm seeing a lot of this today in business. Or they need to kind of just tighten up that sail a little bit, right? It's not exactly getting the maximum wind, and you got to sheet the sail a little bit. But yeah, it's just what I'm trying to say using some of these metaphors is leaders and CEOs need to be maybe a bit more patient.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Which is hard when you're trying to grow business.
I'll just say really quickly, we don't have any public. We don't have any funding or whenever raise money, but they also the boards need to be a bit more patient. But I get that's hard. I trust me, I get it. It's just sometimes the CEOs don't have a choice because there's other things that in control. But patience is at maybe a premium today.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally agree. So we've touched a little bit on community. Can you talk about maybe the community focus, the member focus, and customer focus in a people first strategy?
Yeah, we can share the visual. If you go to tacgtm.com, you can see the visual. But we built a whole model. So now it's how do you do this? So we built a model called the People First GTM model that shows you how to actually implement this approach in a business. And it's 3 different types of channels. That's the community-led, member-led, customer-led growth stuff we were talking about, and I can unpack those. There's 3 types of broad offers you got to put into those channels. There's content-led growth, event-led growth, and product-led growth that you can use in all 3 of those channels. And then there's this partner-led motion. This idea of partnering with people from a content standpoint, an event standpoint, a sales standpoint, a technology standpoint, a marketing standpoint. There's so many types of partnerships that, there's to go at it alone from a customer standpoint, you can partner with your customers a lot better. To go at it alone does not make sense these days, right? So how do you, build plays that are going to help, activate these channels a bit better, bring these offers to life that are ultimately a lot of the ways that you're going to build trust in these channels. And each channel, starting with community-led, is there to do a specific thing. So community-led is about creating demand. How do you actually create demand with the right audience? So interest, establish the trust building through all of these different places, both in person. Oh, there you go. The model right here. Perfect. I love it. Thank you for pulling that up. How do you build this demand, to create this demand in this audience in places that you don't have direct ownership of? I call them unowned communities. I would call this right now we're building this idea of people first go to market in LinkedIn, community led, where this is all about trying to get people to maybe follow, tag, engage, maybe become a lead, right? Whatever. This is community led growth at its finest. This is a great example. Member-led is when you think about how do you build your own membership community, membership experience where you as the brand, the company, have created an owned community. And there's a lot of examples of this in B2B and B2C. The easiest way to think about this big shift is moving from a resource center or the resource section of a website. And imagine having all of that in a one-click experience. We can sign up with your email, you can sign up with a social media profile, and you get all of the company's content and other membership benefits in one click. Wouldn't that be nice, Jen? Is that nice?
I mean, anything in one click, right? Remove the friction of all of the steps that we have to do to get what we're looking for.
I think this is one of the ways that websites will be disrupted and innovated in the future. But we did this kind of HubSpot Academy. We did this at Drift Insider, member-led. And we're doing it with Club PF. It's a little bit different because Club PF is also it's not free. We don't have a free version. It is paid. But for most businesses, you would use your member-led approach, not have a paid version. You might have a paid version, but it'd be a free community where you get all your content, all these other benefits. And yeah, you might have a more premium paid version, but that's going to create a more deeper relationship with these buyers and customers where you capture the demand. You actually now have a way to collect a lot of first party and zero party engagement data and use that in a way to help the trust building process go a little bit faster and also give them a lot more value and personalize the experience, all these things. And then customer led, it's all about how do you convert this demand. So this demand becomes this superpower, this super like powerful resource for your business to help you acquire more demand, right? So that's where the flywheel kind of graphic comes into play. And of course, riffing off of HubSpot's inbound flywheel. But customer led is about deep customer partnership and adding a lot of adding a lot of things to customer relationships, both from a marketing standpoint, a sales standpoint, a CS standpoint, a product standpoint, a finance standpoint, that helps you really lean into the most important asset a business can have outside of just the amount of cash they have, which is their customers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is, the way you describe it, it sounds very simple. However, I feel like in practice, this is, it's really challenging to do this properly. And like really actually, because what you're talking about, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, my interpretation, you're talking about like creating value for people and being useful and helpful and educating, as opposed to, creating leads and creating demand for your product, and that sort of comes as a benefit of doing this properly. And so I can think of a lot of, things that make this challenging, but I'm curious your take on like, what are some of the challenges with actually implementing an approach like this that people might struggle with?
Well, I think it's just skill sets. It's like you don't know what you don't know, and they don't teach any of this. Like they don't teach most schools. It's why we built the HubSpot Education Partner Program at HubSpot, to teach people about inbound and inbound marketing and all these other things, and the HubSpot software in schools and universities, because colleges are like 5, 10, if not more years behind in all of this stuff. And then marketing and sales is changing fast because the world is changing fast. I always go back to things that just you can't kind of argue. They're like there's facts. Like these are the undeniable truths. So as things change faster in the world, you have to keep up. And a lot of people just can't keep up, right? So we want to help people keep up. That's why we started TAC and Club PF and all these other things. So I think it's a confluence of different reasons why it's hard to actually do, and ideas and conversations are always easier than execution. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, the status quo is a very dangerous, scary thing. And there's one thing that's definitely true in the world, and that's constant change. So if you're not constantly thinking about how to change and are changing, you will be impacted at some point. So it's a matter of like, when do you want to maybe make the leap or take the effort and time to think about learning this new way, this new approach. And it's not that hard. Honestly, this is not like rocket science. This is nothing. This is not hard. It's more just, I need to maybe change my mind about things, change my belief system. And I need to get other people to do that, which I know is definitely hard. So it's not easy, no easy thing there sometimes, but going through the motion of like just saying, all right, well, I'm going to commit to doing this is where it all begins. So the simple answer is it's a lack of maybe the willingness of folks, but then also it's nothing to their own fault. It's just who teaches this stuff, right? Like that. I mean, that's why HubSpot Academy is so big and so important, I think, because there's a lot of lack of education out there, right? And there's a lot of stuff out there from a lot of great people now, right? The rise of the creator economy, things like that, 100%. But you got to be careful with some of that stuff too, right? Because everyone, there's a drug that affects us all. Can you guess that drug that affects us all, Jen?
Oh gosh. Are we talking about hype again?
No. The drug that affects us all that can really be dangerous when it comes to potentially what you're learning and like listening to other people is money.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a word of caution for people, right? So
yeah, for sure. Well, and I think too, certainly like being flexible and being able to adapt to the world around, like it's super, super important. But this is also, I think that, in my career and my network, like I find that an area that people really companies tend to struggle with is content. And this is a very content centric strategy, like not only creating content, but really curating it in a way that's useful. Because you can create the community and create the membership and, have it not be useful, right? And then you're going to lose people, and it's not going to have the same impact. And so I think, over the last, I don't know how many years, 10 years or so, people have gotten really comfortable, pouring money into a paid acquisition strategy and crossing their fingers that they're going to get the people they need from that, right? And, oh, this is a scalable channel. But really, if you do content well, you don't need that approach, in my opinion. But it's an area that I get a lot of questions about. People are really uncomfortable with content and creating and curating content in a easy to understand, simple and useful way. And that's where, when I hear you talk, I think this is where people might stumble and might need to, as you talk about skills, like level up your skills and your thinking around a focus on content and what you need to do to make it more useful and more consumable for your members, and really write about stuff that they care about, which goes back to actually understanding who they are and what they want from you, right? So
it's content, but there's actually a more important, higher level thing than just the content. It is content at the end of the day, but like there's something more important. It's your point of view and story. Mm-hmm. That is the red thread for your content. Mm-hmm. That's actually the thing that most people don't spend enough time on, don't ever create, maybe don't keep obsessing about and thinking about and like repeating themselves about. Because it's very clear, like what our red thread is: people first. I mean, it's how many times have I said people first today? It's probably like 100. So inbound marketing, red thread, right? It's like you name it, you name this thing, right? So and you have to think about that thing based off of things that are affecting your customers and buyers, right? So it's going back to those undeniable truths. And like you kind of have to just be a human anthropologist. You study these things, and to your point, getting to know your customers, it's getting to know what is not the persona, but it's like getting to know the things that are changing the way they live and work, and then thinking about how you tell your story, how that's going to resonate with them and connect with them in an authentic way, and then building the right product for that. Easier said than done, right? I mean, of course, that's if you're trying to, I guess, I don't say be perfect at it, but that's for me. If you look at like a lot of the successful local businesses, and so it can be small business or a really big business, that's what they do, right? That's what they do. And and that's how you create a business that has more like durability and staying power, because there's actually a foundation to the business, versus there's a lot of businesses that either don't have a really strong foundation or don't have a foundation at all. And that's those businesses from what I've studied are the ones that go out of business probably a lot faster than the ones that have a foundation.
Yeah. That's a really interesting distinction there. I'm curious how you think about, success metrics in a people first strategy. Like, how do you know that your approach is, maybe it's in different specific areas broken down, or maybe it's just holistically a people first strategy? Like, how do you know that it's working?
If you actually flash that graphic up again, that model, sure. We've outlined 3, we would argue, is like the most important metrics for each of those 3 channels. So at the beginning with community led, it's just about like engagement, followership, and ultimately like leads. Like you're trying to get someone's email address, right? And or phone number, right? So you get phone number or email is like the way you build a relationship with someone. It's like, that's pretty much it, right? I mean, what else would you have other than email and phone number? Address, I guess, but that's not really probably going to be a thing, right? Like for most companies. And then member-led growth, it's like, get someone to sign up. Like, now it's talked about like, how many people like download all of our content, form after form. Like, no, just become a member, sign up for the membership experience, the own community. And then it's like, how many of those become sales qualified leads, opportunities? How many of those people are customers, et cetera, et cetera. And then for customer-led, it's like the customers, it's the retention, it's the advocates. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into those more like outcome-based output type metrics. Some of them are more like, the community led stuff is more like the inputs you need to generate a customer, of course. And there's a ton of metrics you can measure across all of that. And there's of course metrics for like community led, not community led, content led, event led, and product led. The way I think about, and partner led, by the way, the way I think about these growth strategies is there has to be a real data model behind it for you to call it X-led growth. Like the first one that really came to mind is like sales-led growth. And sales is super scientific. Sales math, like sales is a very quantifiable scientific thing. Sales-led growth, that's been like, outbound, if you will. Like that's so metrics driven. Product-led growth, probably the second one, super metrics driven. So we will have eventually like data models for all 7 of those different growth strategies. So like I sometimes look at some of these like X-led growth things and I'm like, I question, like, I don't know, my definition, that's not really something you call X-led growth because I don't know, or you have to show me a data model that backs that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very tricky. And I think that's just thinking about marketing holistically, why things like brand are difficult for companies to maintain focus on, because there are certain things that are just harder to measure. They're not impossible to measure. They're just harder. They're not as scientific, like you said, as a sales-led model, or, here's $1 and here's where that dollar came from, right? Like once you start getting into, multi-touch attribution and thinking about all the different touch points that people go through to become a customer, it's a lot more challenging to measure that. But having at least a desire to measure it, I think, is just the most important piece. Like having a data-driven approach, and you might not measure the right metric on day one, but figuring out as you go, actually that metric doesn't matter quite as much as this other one over here. And that having that like culture of discovery and experimentation with that stuff, I think, is where you can really find success.
Yeah, and you make a great point, because there's 3 kind of outcomes that I've like identified with Nick as the outcomes of this model. One is word of mouth. You're going to have a tremendously stronger word of mouth motion coming into your business if you lean into people first, go to GTM, go to market. Mm-hmm. Like word of mouth is one thing. Second thing is ecosystem. You will build a small or big ecosystem around this. I mean, a great example of people first go to market are chambers of commerce. Chambers of commerce is a interesting model to use to look at this in a different way. So we can talk about that if you want, but there's an ecosystem that can be built. Doesn't have to be software. An ecosystem can be formed through any type of for-profit, non-profit, B2B, B2C, whatever type of business. And then the third one is kind of the one you were just mentioning, which is ultimately all of these things are here to do one thing, which is to make the brand more human. So to improve each interaction that is the sum of the brand. Like the brand is just all the things that someone experiences over time. And most of those interactions are either going to be with people or software. Or like, I should say people or the product, whatever the product is, right? It could be literally like your iPhone. Like most interactions for Apple or with the iPhone, most likely, with their computer. So like, yeah, you better make that thing awesome, right? Like for other companies, like the most important thing is the people, right? Like for TAC GTM, the marketing firm side, like it's Nick and I right now, like that's going to be really important from a brand standpoint, because that's the product for that one, right? So anyway, like I digress a little bit, but like those 3 things, word of mouth, ecosystem, and brand, are the ultimate things that this model is trying to help influence and make better, if you will.
Amazing. That's super helpful. Before we wrap up, it's clear we could continue this conversation for probably another hour. But before we wrap, I'd love to hear kind of any advice you have for somebody who's listening today and is thinking, I want to make this leap. I want to make some adjustments and I want to start a people first strategy. Like, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to just get going?
I mean, just like learn about it, like read about it, like understand. Do you believe in this new approach? It's all about belief, right? Like like take a look at your metrics, like for your traditional transactional channels. Are they getting better? Are they getting worse? Are they staying the same? Are they in a good spot? Are they not in a good spot? Because that right there will tell you like, hey, I need to find at least and try a different way. So, use your data, use your instincts and gut, and then learn about it. You can join Club PF, clubpf.co.co. Like, you can learn about it there. But like, there's a lot of people on LinkedIn talking about this stuff, right? There's, Catalyst just announced the customer-led podcast. Catalyst is a great company. Go check that out, right? There's a lot of people talking about community-led, of course, content, event-led, product-led. Like, just go learn and like be a sponge. And then what I would like to do when I learn is like start to try it or teach other people about it, because that's how you actually will understand it and master it. When it comes to people first experience, see if you can apply that in the context of your own personal life or situation or at your business.
Yeah, that's great. Great tips. I'll make another plug for a Gia Laudy, who's a mentor of mine, and Claire Swellenthrop just came out with a book, Customer-Led Growth. It's a great one. So go check that out if you're looking for more resources. They've got a great blog and great community they've built as well. But get in touch with Mark, and I saw Nick in the comments earlier. So get in touch with these guys if you want to learn more about people first strategy. But I can't thank you enough. This has been such a great conversation, super interesting. And I wish we could keep chatting about this. We'll probably have a follow-up at some point because there's so much more to dive into here. But I wish you all the luck. And thanks again for sharing this approach with us today.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thanks for having me in the show. And if you're at Inbound, I'll be at Inbound in Boston in the first week of September. So hope to see some of you folks at Inbound.
There you go. Well, thank you everybody for listening in, and thanks for all the engagement in the comments today. Love to see that. Next week, as I mentioned, I'll be back with another episode with Scott Brinker. I will see you then.